Hey, gang. We're going to go through a couple readings about government. If you want to play along at home and you want to highlight along using your Chromebook or something, remember, once you've opened the PDF, select Open With, and then select Doc Hub, and that will open it up in the Doc Hub menu for you. We're not going to do the brainstorming part, but we're going to come down to our first reading. Remember, our learning targets are the ability to identify the characteristics of each type of government, and then the strengths and weaknesses, or advantages and disadvantages, or pros and cons, however you want to look at that. So I'm just going to read. I'm going to be highlighting as I go. I'm going to talk through some of my thinking. You can follow along or not. It's your call. I'm not your judge. So anyway, here we go. Get my highlighting tool ready. Dictators take and hold power by force. Most dictators come to power violently after overthrowing a government. Some dictatorships may be led by a single person, sometimes from the military or a small group of military officers or political leaders. This often happens during a time of political unrest or national emergency. All right, so a couple of key details about dictatorships. We see that they take and hold power by force, and they often come to power violently. Usually they're led by a single person. It's pretty tough to have a multi-person dictatorship, and it's often from the military. We see that these tend to happen during a time of political unrest or national emergency. So your country has a lot of chaos going on, for example, and you get someone who says, I'm the only one that can save us. I'm the only one that can restore order. So pick me. Just kidding. Don't pick me. I'm going to do it myself. And then they take power because people don't like chaos. People don't like unknown. And when someone says, hey, I can resolve all of this, I can get rid of all the chaos, and I can restore normalcy, people maybe tend to go along with that because, again, chaos is messy and people don't like messy. So reading on, dictatorships share some advantages of absolute monarchies. Power is centralized in the hands of a single military or political leader who can get things done efficiently. With control of the military and police, the leader can put an end to political unrest and maintain peace and order. So I'm going to change my color here, and I'm going to make sure that my advantages, I'm going to highlight advantages actually in yellow. That's just going to be my chosen color. And so power is centralized. That means no bickering, no squabbling, right? When you're the dictator, you dictate and things get done. There's no need for debate. There's no need for back and forth. There's no need for both sides or four sides or seven sides. There's just the dictator's side. In the hands of a single military political leader who can get things done efficiently. Again, that's where the word dictator comes from. When you dictate something, you say it, you speak it, you proclaim it. So they say, this is what's happening. Pineapple on pizza is hereby outlawed forever. There's no debating the merits of pineapple on pizza, which is disgusting and vile. Why would you want warm pineapple on your pizza? But anyway, there's no need to put that to a vote, right? Because you're a dictator. With control of the military and police, the leader can put an end to political unrest and maintain peace and order. They can, right? Because they control the military and the police, and they can say, hey, squash that rebellion. However, when you're putting an end to peace and order through extreme measures, like extreme use of like the military or the police, and you're just sweeping the streets and you're not allowing people to protest or to speak out or to have any form of unrest at all ever, that tends to be a pretty nasty thing for the people who are speaking out and protesting. So while they can put an end to it, and that's an advantage if you are the dictator for sure, it is definitely not an advantage if you are the people. In fact, all of these advantages with dictatorships, they're really only advantages if you're the dictator or the dictator's inner circle. They're not really advantage for the Joe Bag of Donuts common folk like you and I. On to the disadvantages. That same power, however, can easily lead to disadvantages. Dictators can abuse citizens who oppose the dictator's rule. Citizens who oppose a dictatorship may be thrown in jail, tortured, or even killed without cause, meaning for no reason. Over time, citizens may demand that a dictator return control to elected officials, which can lead to riots or civil war, making it next to impossible to govern the nation. So we're going to highlight our disadvantages. I'm just going to go, how about this lovely shade of blue for my disadvantages? Same power can easily lead to disadvantages. Dictators can abuse citizens. Yeah, that's a pretty big disadvantage, right? Taking advantage of your citizens, abusing them, throwing them into jail, tortured, or even killed. This is all too sadly common. Sadly common in dictatorships where people, political prisoners, political opposition, people that the government does not like are locked up and put in prison. They're disappeared. They're taken from their families. They don't have any rights. And you might say, well, that can't happen in the United States. We should have trials and there's rules and laws. Yeah, that's the idea. And that's why it's so important, that we have these systems of rules and laws and multiple sides to a debate and discussion. And that's, the beauty of democracy. It's messy. It's incredibly messy and chaotic. But boy, it sure beats the alternative of, Dictator Dan coming in and just locking up political opposition, or throwing citizens who speak out in prison, or torturing or killing. Right? This is nasty stuff. It does unfortunately happen around the world even today. Sometimes we like to think of dictatorships as a thing of the past, a thing of the bygone area, but these things still happen to varying degrees all around the world today, unfortunately. Over time, citizens may demand a dictator return control to elected officials. Yeah, they're going to protest, which can lead to riots or civil war, making it next to impossible to actually govern the nation. If you are constantly trying to quell unrest, or if you are constantly fearful that your citizens are going to revolt and overthrow you because you are a dictator, that's going to make it really hard to get anything done over time. So while a dictatorship might seem, attractive in the short term, it's definitely super chaotic, super terrible in the long term. So let's take a look at some of these advantages, right? We highlighted it in yellow and green, and what I want to do is just simply restate them down here. And so I'm just going to plop in a little text box. Advantages that we have for a dictatorship. We can see, I changed the color on that one on accident. We see power is centralized. We also see in an advantage is get things done efficiently, which means quickly, without bickering. And I accidentally highlighted this in the wrong color. Whoopsies. But that should also be that the leader maintain peace and order. Again, these are all really only advantages if you yourself are actually the dictator. If you're not the dictator, there are most definitely disadvantages. Speaking of, abuse citizens, murder, torture, imprison, etc. So that is definitely a disadvantage of a dictatorship. Let me get that spelled correctly there. We also see lead to riots, civil unrest. And then we also see impossible to govern. One question I am still wondering, and here's where you would just type a question about dictatorships. How many governments around the world today would be considered dictatorships? There we go. Right, because and here's the deal too, right? When you become a dictator, you don't say, "Hey, people of Cantonia, I am now your dictator." Right? You don't necessarily do it like that. It's kind of not something you want to advertise or talk about publicly. It happens, and everyone knows you're the dictator, but you don't really announce it, right? If you go on, to the website of Cantonia, and you go to the official government website, it's not going to say "Welcome to the dictatorship of Cantonia," right? That's just not how that works. So I'm just curious, how many dictatorships around the world today exist? How many countries would be considered dictatorships? Anyway, that is kind of what we've got going here for dictatorship. We highlighted our key details. We highlighted our advantages, and we highlighted our disadvantages. I am now going to go on to monarchy. A monarchy, I'm going to get my highlighting tool ready again, and I am going back to my green shade for my key details. Here we go. A monarchy is a form of government headed by a single ruler called a monarch. Monarchs go by many names, including king, queen, or emperor. Many monarchs inherit their power and expect to rule for life. This means the authority to rule is passed down through families. When a monarch dies, a relative, usually a son or daughter, becomes the next monarch. Monarchies are one of the oldest forms of government still found in the world today. Hundreds of years ago, some monarchs ruled with unlimited power. Most monarchs today, however, have limited power, often based on a constitution. The United Kingdom, the Queen, has a monarch who serves as ceremonial head of state. Real power to govern is held by the United Kingdom's democratically elected leaders. All right, so let's find some key details about monarchy. Headed by a single ruler called a monarch. And if you think to language arts class, that affix, that prefix mon or mono, meaning one, or singular, meaning like monocle, you wear a monocle. Hey, did you know that the Monopoly Man doesn't wear a monocle. I bet a lot of you thought that the Monopoly man wears a monocle. Does not. Anyway, but Monopoly, right? A single owner of a business. There you go. Monarchs go by many names, including king, queen, or emperor. Many monarchs inherit their power and expect to rule for life. Daddy monarch has baby monarch, and eventually baby monarch grows up to be queen monarch and goes on to rule. It means the authority is passed down through families, meaning no elections. When a monarch dies, a relative usually becomes the next monarch. And we also see it's one of the oldest forms of government still found in the world today. So there we have our monarchs. Let's move on. Monarchies have several advantages, and so again, we're just going to use our yellow color because why not? Monarchies have several advantages. First, when a monarch has complete power, decisions can be carried out on his or her word alone. There is no need for a lot of bickering. A second advantage is a clear line of succession. Citizens living in a monarchy know who is next in line for the throne. And finally, a monarch can inspire great loyalty among his or her subjects, thus creating a bond to hold the nation together. So here we go. A monarch has complete power, and so decisions can be carried out on his or her word alone. No need for a lot of bickering. Sounds a lot like a dictatorship. And this is just between you and me. A monarchy to me is kind of like a glorified dictatorship, right? A monarch, a king or a queen is just a dictator that like everyone happens to love and that we romanticize. But in terms of living under a monarchy, you as a citizen don't have any power. So unless you're like in the monarch's inner circle or related to the monarch, you're just some peon, some Joe Bag of Donuts living in the monarchy and you don't have any power. Yeah, I mean, it's great if you're like the prince, but what if you're just like, the blacksmith down the street or just, the teacher down the street? You have no power. That's not great. Citizens living in a monarchy know who is next in line, which is kind of nice, right? There is no question. You know who's going to be leading you in the future. And then finally, a monarch can inspire great loyalty. Hence the phrase, God save the queen. That was a terrible accent. At the same time, let's move on. At the same time, a monarchy has some major disadvantages. One is the varying quality of hereditary leaders. A successful monarch in one generation may be followed by a very unsuccessful one in the next. He or she may make poor choices. And another is how difficult it is for a monarch to govern a modern nation. One, that a job has simply become too big for any but the most exceptional monarchs to do well. So let's look at those disadvantages. Varying quality of leaders. One generation followed by a dud. All right, so you might have a king who's awesome, but the king's son or daughter, everyone knows, is a total clown and not a great leader. And then, thump, they're next in line, and so now you're stuck with this dud until they're replaced. And then again, because they might make poor choices and they're the monarch, there's nobody to stop that. Another is how difficult it is difficult for a monarch to run a modern nation. Right? Modern countries are huge, they're massive, and you need more than one person to do the job. Similar to a dictatorship, you need more than one person to do it well. And monarchs can have advisors, but still, it's a really difficult thing for a monarch. So let's rehash some of our advantages here. Complete power, no bickering. And then we also see you know who is next, right? Loyalty. Unless, of course, you don't like the king or the queen because they're evil, then, disloyalty. Ooh. All right. And then disadvantages to a monarchy. We've got our varying quality of leaders because you're not chosen based on merit, just based on who your daddy is. Who is your daddy and what does he do? I will give one US nickel to anyone who's still watching this and who can tell me who I just did an impression of and what movie. Anyway, let's see here. Varying quality, difficult job. And I'm also going to put no real rights for citizens, right? Because in a monarchy, you don't get to participate. One question I'm still wondering, all the questions about the British monarchy. I ain't an expert on the royals and the royal family. I know a thing or two, but there's all kinds of questions about the British monarchy that I'm sure that you have. So go ahead and pop one or two of them in there. Anyway, that's what you should be doing for today. And then as we go forward over the course of the next couple of days, you're going to do a very similar process for theocracy, single party state, parliamentary democracy, and then presidential democracy. That's what we've got. Hope you're doing well. God save the queen. Pip, pip, cheerio.